Well, a very good evening, everybody. Welcome to Graham Easton's playlist with me, Graham Easton. And tonight, I'm going to be joined by basketball royalty, Mr. Kieron Achara, who is joining me live and direct to take your questions and also chat about the music in his life. And if you've never listened to Graham Easton's playlist on the podcast version or this Facebook live version, then it's just a bit of fun based around music. And it's not just the guests choosing their favourite music of all time. We challenge the guests to choose songs that are motivational to them, songs that perhaps they associate with a sporting moment in their life, and perhaps ones that are significant in some kind of way. Maybe ones they listen to in the gym or ones they have on their headphones before they enter the pitch or the court. So we're delighted to have Kieron with us. We'll bring him in a minute. We're live, COVID ready from the Well podcast studio. So Keith's pressing all sorts of magic buttons there. I know what about three of them do. So we're in the Well podcast studio for all your podcasting needs. Then you can join us in the Well podcast studio. There's Keith. He's very happy. Got to be plugged in there. So without further ado, let's bring in the basketball royalty, Mr. Kieron Achara. How are you doing this evening, Kieron?
I'm good, thanks. Just trying to stay quiet so I don't wake the wee ones up. But yeah, I'm feeling good.
Yeah, we're just saying we've both got kids, but at different ends of the age spectrum. But they're both in bed and they've both been primed and ready not to wake up. So we shouldn't curse that. But we also must obviously say thank you for taking time at your very, very busy schedule. Even though you're not playing just now, you're very, very busy, and we'll hear more about that later on tonight. But I always take great interest these days in what is behind everybody, and I'm very pleased you've gone big tonight, Kieron. You've gone big on the branding behind you, which I'm sure we'll talk about during the show. That's some of your finest gear behind you there.
Well, there's a lovely mirror behind that, so I was thinking, let's spruce it up a little bit. I've been doing a lot of video interviews lately, so I thought, just step my game up for this.
Yeah, so the premise of tonight that Kieron and I will chat about his career and music, and we'll ask some questions I suppose people would expect to be asking of Kieron Achara. But the other good thing about tonight is that you guys who are watching on Facebook or YouTube, get involved here tonight. Ask Kieron any kind of question you want, but let's try and keep it, however, to mainly basketball or music. And if they're good, interesting questions, we'll just put them on the screen for everybody to look at, including Kieron. So don't be shy. Get involved. Get your fingers on the home keys if you've got a keyboard old style, and type in your question for Kieron Achara. So that's the basic premise for tonight. But we'll start with, it'd be remiss of us not to kind of make a nod and a wink to COVID and how people have been coping with that. And it's been obviously a terrible situation. You've got a couple of kids there. I think your oldest one is primary too. So how have you found it? We're 4 or 5 months on. Have you been doing a wee bit of homeschooling, Kieron? Or have you been stir crazy in the house there?
Yeah, well, my lovely wife, she's a nurse, and she actually got thrown at the deep end. So she was off on maternity leave and went back to work at the start of lockdown. So then I went from my office setting to being in the house, and to be fair, I really struggled at the start. So I was, I'm doing the homeschooling, even just, I always like to think I was a good father, but then actually having to be a father, like before I used to call it babysitting.
Yes.
So I was just really kind of, kind of in a whole different state of emotions kind of going through there. Thankfully, I got some balance and kind of started to embrace it a little bit as the journey went on. So, it was kind of nice to spend some quality time with my kids. I obviously had a long basketball career that I was always on the road, and quality family time is hard to come by. So I started to embrace that, and then at the same time, I got to learn a little bit from my daughter's primary one stuff. Actually being involved in her schooling and everything, I kind of really, really appreciated that. So as time went on, I really embraced that, and I was very thankful with my work as well. They allowed me the flexibility to work from home, and they were always checking in to see how I was getting on and making sure that everything was good. So I was very, very, very fortunate.
So what was your specialist topic doing the homeschooling then? Are you more like a maths man, like a bit of science, or was it full on PE all the time?
Well, it's funny because we did the PE with Joe in the morning to kind of get us going. So I really embraced that, and it was funny because the first few days my daughter was loving it, and then she just got bored. So we had to switch things up. We did a couple of different circuits and stuff like that. I maybe spent a little bit too much time on the physical education part. But yeah, she just the for me, the maths, it was because it was kind of tested me at times, what's
Yeah.
like 3 + 3 and stuff, but yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it.
Good stuff. And, in lockdown, I was chatting to Kirsty Gilmore, who I know you know well, who's a great basketball, badminton.
She's great at basketball as well.
And, she was doing some great sort of drills and sort of tricks and stuff. Now, maybe I'm making this up, but did you sort of do something similar? I don't know if you were doing a sort of wee challenge with Kirsty, but there was some kind of thing going on there on social media in the early days of lockdown.
Kirsty was always challenging me to do the things that she could do. And honestly, like, I have so much respect for Kirsty and her talent. It was unreal, some of the things we do. But my wife was getting angry at nights because I'd be in waiting for the kids to go down, and I would be doing these drills over and over again to try and get them down. But it was a struggle. But it was fun. A little bit of banter and kind of embracing new sports too. Was kind of fun.
Good stuff, right? So if you've just joined us, I'm talking to Kieron Achara, Great Britain and Scotland basketball star. He's retired, or so he tells us. I'm sure he's playing in the back garden somewhere. So if you've got a question for Kieron, don't be shy. Get in the comments, post your question there, and we'll choose some of the best ones and ask Kieron a question about his career, perhaps, or his music, or maybe if you're a basketball player from back in the day, you want to reminisce about a horrendous foul that Kieron committed on you back in 1995 or whenever he used to play. But let's go back to the history books. When Kieron sort of grown up, I usually find that a lot of people like yourself, Kieron, the renowned for obviously sport that we're talking to you about, but there's probably quite a few sports that someone itself was kind of into or interested, or maybe you tried out, and obviously you've then specialised in basketball. But for you, were there a number of sports that you were kind of into, or you could have gone down a different route entirely from basketball?
I just love sport. And I just love to compete from a young age. I was always involved in sport, but I think obviously for most people, it started off with football. I went along to my local club was Thistle at the time, and the usual, all right, big man, you go in goals.
So right,
putting goals, and then I got out of goals because I was talented enough, and then I became centre half, and I just was a glory hunter. I just wanted to score goals, and unfortunately, Peter Crouch wasn't around in my day, so I didn't get to embrace that. But believe it or not, I started to grow so fast that my knees started to hurt. So any little knock on my knees or anything, I was just in agony. So I'd stopped playing football pretty young, maybe about 12, 13. And that's when you made the logical move that everyone does, is I moved to lawn bowls. So as you do, lawn bowls, and everyone always laughs, but it was, again, there was a local club, Players Bowling Club, and one of the guys from my neighbourhood, he used to go along, so I went along with him. I think I actually lied, said I was a member of a club somewhere else. And I remember my first bowl, it literally sat right on the jack, my first ever bowl. And from there, it was just, I became club champion in my first year, the junior club champion, represented the county. I really, really enjoyed it. And at the same time, that's when I found basketball as well. So I tried rugby a little bit as well, but my chicken legs, I wasn't built for rugby, not at all. But actually, at one point, I was making a decision about should I stick with bowls or basketball. So there was actually a thought process there,
right.
And the fact that the bowl shoes I had only went up to a size 13.
Right.
I remember writing, it was Hensley at the time as a company. And they'll be looking back at this now and saying, "Oh wow, we missed out." But I wrote them a letter saying if they could make bigger sizes, and they never got back to me. So that was the end of my bowls career. So it was quite a unique story there.
And in terms of the other side of sort of growing up, in terms of the music, which is half the reason we're here, any early memories of getting into music, or maybe even the first piece of music you bought, which for you, I'm going to guess, would probably have been CD as opposed to vinyl, or maybe I'm being unkind to you, I don't know.
It was a tape deck, and it was,
right.
I'm not even going to tell you, actually I'll need to. It was Bonkers, Happy Hardcore.
All right.
DJ Hixie and Sharky, and I had them all, and I absolutely loved it. I remember there was it was Toy Town was my favourite, but it was straight straight happy hardcore. It was just, that's just what we played. And then it was from my basketball side, as soon as I started playing basketball, I got straight into it was like Notorious B.I.G., Biggie, all the rap, hip hop. So that was kind of like how that kind of surfaced as well. So I was very eclectic in my mix. But like I said, where I grew up, everyone just listened to happy hardcore or Oasis.
Yeah, and basketball, as you know, is well regarded as a sport which is about everything through entertainment. Obviously, the sport itself is phenomenal, but the whole theatre of it all, and music is obviously very much part and parcel. And particularly, obviously, when you go across to NBA, but they do it not too bad over there. It's fair to say. But in terms of Scotland, it's a completely different setup. But as you know, that we were involved with doing the sports presentation, albeit a completely different level from the NBA at the likes of Kelvin Hall and Meadowbank. But when you've mentioned that music, is music important for you and teams you've played for? I mean, some teams, it's they've got the same music and it's really much part of the pre-match when they do their warm-up for 20 minutes, whatever. Was that important to you in the teams that you played with?
Yeah, I think for most teams I've ever been on, we really, really embraced as a team effort. Coaches, support staff, about making playlists. So they want everyone to feel comfortable, get motivated in a certain way, and music is a great motivator. So, in most teams I played, and it was funny because obviously when I went over to like Spain and Italy, it was so eclectic because one minute you're listening to this Spanish song that you have no clue what they're saying, and the next thing it's rap. I was playing my British grime music and so forth. So it was always kind of cool to kind of embrace other cultures as well. But at the same time, music was always seen as a motivator. And we actually, some of my college days, we had some of my teammates who were he was actually a BBL player, Reggie Jackson, his name was. He played at Newcastle Eagles. He was a great singer as well. So he would sing, kind of get us in the mood too, which was quite cool. Very different. The fact that it was more R&B, but it was a real talent.
But there must have been some people you've played with, Kieron, whose musical choices, to put a not too fine a point, was pretty dodgy. Are you willing to name and shame anybody had?
I would say, out of all, Ali Fraser,
right?
He would listen to his Taylor Swift on repeat. His music saying, and see the thing, I was never a confident one. I would never take over. Like, okay, I'm going to be DJ now. It's not my style, because you would find I saw Hastings one, a little bit of Bieber would pop out of nowhere and stuff. I wasn't ready to take that risk, so it was one of those things that I'll leave it to the pros. But yeah, Ali Fraser, he really embraced his Taylor Swift and his pop music. I thought it was quite unique for a basketball player.
Okay, now we're going to come on to Kieron's 5 motivational tunes shortly, but we'll bring in a question just now from a playlist regular. Boise, that's how you say his name. Nothing to do with Only Fools and Horses, which is his unofficial tagline. So his question's up there, Kieron. Do you think the NBA should have more regular season games in the UK like the NFL and MLB to help grow the sport further? There's a nice easy one for you, Kieron, to start off.
Yeah, I mean, I've been very fortunate recently, doing a little bit of work with Sky and so forth. They've actually upped their game, and they've actually now got a studio. And so to answer the question is yes. The thing for me, it was always the timings. It was the late games and so forth. Is there a way we could actually? I see that right now they have the NBA heat check and stuff with Ovi and JD and Mo. It's great to see that they're actually starting to get a little bit more coverage. But yeah, I think there's definitely a need for more to be playing. But at the same time, British basketball for me is I want to get that front and center. I remember the 90s and the TV games then. I would love to see BBL a little bit more on TV instead of just on YouTube and so forth.
Going back to the 90s, which is going to go back to anyway, when I first got involved in doing basketball and doing the presentation at Kelvin Hall and Meadowbank, Keith was doing the music, I was doing a wee bit of basic commentary, and I do distinctly remember, when we first started, I'm pretty sure it was the Kelvin Hall in Glasgow. There was a period, there were some absolutely, generally outstanding games. Now, you were playing maybe in the cadet level, at 11 o'clock in the morning for Falkirk. and then 3 years later you're playing in the junior final, and then maybe for those that are really good like yourself, maybe played in the senior men's final later on if your team in the final as well. But I always remember that was probably the turn of the century, 99, 2000. There was some absolutely fantastic games. I mean, I don't know if you've obviously played a couple of games in your time, so you can't remember everything, but do you have any recollection of those early games, that cadet level? Because I thought the skill level was phenomenal at that level period.
I loved it. I remember. I mean, it was. I would play 3 games on any given day, and it was always great because the second game, all the senior players started to show up, so it was kind of like you were trying to entertain the senior players. But yeah, the Kelvin Hall memories, they never ended well for me. I always lost in the finals, and we played. I remember it was Troon. We played one year, and we were up, and a young guy. I remember his name, to Adair Cameron, hit a couple of free throws to take it into overtime, and we lost in overtime. But for me, one of the best basketball players of that year, my age group, was that Neil Campbell from Troon. I just thought he was just a phenomenal player, and he had a little bit of cockiness about him as well. Like, he knew he was good, and I always respected that, because I was never the confident player. I was always kind of trying to, I guess it was like I was like that imposter syndrome. Are you good enough? Are you good enough? Neil knew it, and I think that I always kind of would, wanted to adopt that kind of style. So yeah, they were great games. A lot of talent, especially those younger age groups back then too. And I was just thankful to be a part of that.
And obviously, you moved on to playing for Scotland and Great Britain, part of Team Scotland Commonwealth Games. I mean, if you're taking a time to reflect on it, I mean, they must be very, very proud at what you've achieved in all those times. I mean, because, it's, people don't obviously associate Scotland necessarily with having that many great basketball players. But there was a period whereby, obviously the Commonwealth Games fairly recently did not too bad there. But you must be personally, and also from the team aspect, pretty proud of what you've achieved and also the generation that you played with.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. It's, if there's one thing I wish I had done, it was embrace that a little bit more. Like, you as an athlete, you're always kind of setting these kind of goals, what you kind of want to achieve, and you want to get there. But what you realize is once you actually get there, there's this kind of like, oh, like what next? But it's the journey to get there is probably the most important thing, and you tend to neglect that. So I think, talking about this pandemic, it was a little bit more time to reflect as well, and kind of look at the things I've done and things that I've achieved. And I was, you're always trying to measure what success actually looks like. And I think from an athletic perspective, we always tend to talk about medals and so forth. Well, I'd never won any medals other than, I won with the Fury back in the day, the senior level, and then when I went to Middlesbrough. But then I was like, have I really been a success? Because if that's how you measure success, there's going to be so many failures out there in essence. So I just started to reflect on the kind of things I'd done and the kind of things I've seen, and not only that, I still get messages from people who have done a school project on me, or they've talked about this, or they're now going on to academies and so forth, and talk about how I was their role model and they wanted to be like me. And I think that's where I started to kind of, wow, like I've actually, there has been an impact there. There has been some success there. And I look at where Scotland is going in GB within the sport. I feel that there's a lot of people who it's more palpable that you can achieve certain things. They actually see the pathways now. When I was coming up, it was still very sporadic. There wasn't a real kind of way to get to a certain level. It was just kind of like, you hoped, and some got lucky. Like if you were 6'7" and above, you had a chance. If you weren't, then yeah, you might as well look at other ways. But I think that's now starting to change, and I'm glad to see that progress.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose one word we might use, and I suppose it's bandied a lot about. They used it a lot at London 2012, and maybe to a slightly lesser degree at Glasgow 2014, and that's the word legacy. So, as you say, maybe not in an obvious way on the court, but the examples you gave there, you've clearly had an impact on people around you to maybe take up the sport, or certainly know who you are and what you stand for. But in terms of talking for legacy, we mentioned at the beginning, you've got a few interesting bits of kit behind you. Do you want to talk us through them? I don't want you to bring them down and bring down the nice wallpaper that was behind it, but what's behind you there? Because that's a pretty decent summary of your illustrious career, is it not?
So this is the Olympic jersey, and this is the away jersey. This is the one we wore against China for our win at the Olympics in 2012. This was our Commonwealth Games jersey, and it's not the original actually, because I gave that away for a raffle because I was told to. So that's the powers that be said they would get me another one. So someone probably got it in the raffle for 50p, which was a maybe I would have probably wanted to keep a lifetime. And the last one was my last GB jersey, the last kind of thing. So yeah, there's a few here that I kind of like. That's actually the only jersey I've got left. Every other one has been in some raffle for some club.
Right.
And like sometimes, like you see, you do the auctions and they're going for like £5 and £10, and you're just thinking to yourself like, like why have I done this? I could give you a £10 donation and kept the jersey.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all for a good cause. If it's going to help try and grow the sport in some way, then so be it.
And one thing that fascinates me about certain sports is the numbers. I mean, some people are quite superstitious about the numbers, but from what I can see here, and best of my memory, I don't think you've always had the kind of same number. Now, that's either you're maybe not just bothered, or it's a certain system whereby, you've got number 4 and you've got number 20. But is that important to you? Because for some sports and some people, that's my number.
I guess so. When I was in college, I wore 42, and then I changed it to 2. And there was no real reason for that. But then when I went pro, you couldn't wear the number 2 because you had to. It was from 4 to. It was actually it changed from 4 to 20 then. So my first year I was given the number 12, and because I was like 2, okay, 1, 2, like it just made sense.
Yeah.
And then a player signed late for our club who had played the year before wearing number 12. So he asked if he could buy the number from me, like literally.
Right.
And I was like, "No, you can have it." He says, "No, that it doesn't work. That we have to pay for it." So he ended up paying me. I'm not going to say the amount, but it was more money than I'd ever seen. So then I thought, what kind of number could I wear next year that someone might come back and want to buy it from me? I could make a little side hustle. But I was given 20. And that year, I got a Reggie plate for my car when I came back home, and it was like K20. So that became my number. As you can see with the GB jersey, I wasn't so lucky that I had a choice of what. I was just thankful to have a jersey. It was one of those things that when I first made the squad, there was 2 players. There was me and Eric Boateng, who always had it was 22 or 23 with no name on the back. So every other player had their name on their back. We were always just there and no more. So when it came to the Olympics, I was just thankful to have any jersey. But if I could choose 20, that would have stuck with it. And for most of my career, for every team I'd been on, I'd wore the number 20.
Yeah. So great stories. I'm always fascinated with those little things about different sports, about, the music side, obviously, and the kind of numbers. But you mentioned Olympics. I was going to kind of bring it in, but maybe in a slightly different way, in terms of, bringing it back to kind of the music-esque part to it. But the opening ceremony at London 2012, and it's people, I think in most cases have said it was just like different class, just completely kind of different. Do you remember much about that, and just being there and being able to, as you said, soak up and appreciate what was happening at that moment in time?
It was, when I say it was like everyone, you hear it all the time, it's very cliche to say it's surreal. I actually randomly a few weeks ago, I was going through my hard drive and I found I'd filmed me walking out during the ceremony. So I got to rewatch the whole me walking out, and honestly, like I can't remember. I was like screaming. I was just so excited. I remember doing a funny dance in front of the camera. It was, it was so hard to remember. It was just, it was the word that you just talk about euphoria.
Yeah,
it was just a situation that I could never really put into words. It was just, I guess, like I said, surreal and really enjoyable. But I couldn't tell you the music. I couldn't tell you what happened. I couldn't tell you who was there or what was there. It was just, I was just totally in the moment and living up. It was just kind of like, wow, I've made it. That was the feeling you kind of got during that opening ceremony.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's talk about some music that you do know about, and that's your top five, but not just a top five as necessarily your favourite tunes. If you just joined us, welcome along to Playlist live on Facebook with me, Graham Easton and Kieron Achara. I asked my guests on this version and the podcast version to choose 5 bits of music which are motivational to them. Perhaps they're ones that are on their playlist in the gym, or ones on their playlist as they're warming up in the court, in Kieron's case, or perhaps for Kieron, it might have been one that he associates with London 2012 or the Commonwealth Games or something like that. So we're going to share Kieron's tunes on the screen. Unfortunately, for licensing reasons, we can't play them, but we can still chat through, and Kieron can tell us what the tunes are and why they're on the list. So the 5 are there. I don't suppose there are any order of hierarchy, or maybe they are, Kieron. Some people will know exactly what they are. Folk are going, I've never heard of that. What's that, Kieron? What are you listening to? So you give us a little wee story behind each one, if that's possible.
Yeah.
Architects, talk us through that one. What's the story there?
So that was, when you're talking about motivation and you're talking about, I have kind of broke it down to eras. So Architects Body Groove reminds me of my Middlesbrough days. So a lot of people forget that I went to Middlesbrough before I went over to the States. And for me, that was a whole different experience, because I went into a team in Middlesbrough. I went to Middlesbrough College. We played in like the under-20s Division 2 in England. We played under-20s, and I can't remember we played about 3 different leagues. But our team was made up of 3 Londoners, 3 Brummies. Then it was me and a guy from Clydebank, Duncan. And then we had a couple of the local guys, Chris Bunton being one of them, Dave Irwin. So we had a real solid team. But London, when I say London, they dominate everything. They dominated the DJing. They were in control. So they introduced me to like garage music, and I really embraced it. And I put Architects Body Groove because that was one of the easier ones to put up. But there was, at the time, it was like More Fire Crew, So Solid Crew, anything with crew on the end of it. And I really just embraced that music. But my friends back in Scotland, I didn't have a clue. So it wasn't the most commercial, but it reminded me of, like I said, it was kind of high tempo, kind of happy times. But we played with a chip on our shoulder, our team, very motivated. And like I said, music was a big part of that.
Right. And your second choice, we've had that on a number of playlists, perhaps for some an obvious choice, but maybe there's a different tweak on this one. Caledonia, Dougie MacLean, why is that on the list?
And that again, that was me when I went to the States, and I was just so homesick. Like it really was. Like it was. I love my university experience. I love being in the States, but I just missed home so much. And it was one of those songs that kind of make you think about, where you come from, what you're doing. Also, even the kind of like the storyline behind it about, you're fallen, kind of left some friends behind and so forth to kind of pursue what you needed to do. And essentially, I'd grown up, and I had to grow up fast. That was the only way you're going to survive over there, in the sense that you're independent. You're away from your friends. You're away from your family. So you just kind of cling on to those kind of moments. So that's why I used to listen to that before for my games. It just kind of made me feel like I was at home a little bit. And so that was something that I absolutely loved. And the next song on this list.
I'm not going to embarrass myself, Kieron. You take over here, son. You do give us the proper way to pronounce this next one, please.
So it's Ma il cielo è sempre più blu, and it's essentially saying that no matter what, my sky's always bluer. You know what I mean? Like, so when I went over to Italy, I loved Italy. I loved the culture. I loved being in Italy. But the thing is, I always kind of used to cling on to going to places that were English spoken, like when I would go out on a night out or whatever, I'd play like British music or American music or whatever it may be. So it was actually my second year in Italy, and I was starting to embrace the culture a little bit more. So I made more friends with the local players and went to their local night, clubs and so forth. And this song always got played, and I had no clue what it was saying,
Mm-hmm.
But they would just be going crazy, singing away, and I just loved the kind of beat to it. So when I actually researched the lyrics and started to understand a little bit more Italian, it resonated with me. It was about, you just keep going no matter what. it's going to be sunnier tomorrow. The sky's going to be there. It's going to be bluer. Just keep going through all the hard times. So again, it was another motivational song that I started to listen to, because it was kind of, again, it was an era for me when I had my music playing. I started to have a little bit of this music, a little bit of that music from places that I'd been. You know, like if I say, like, looking at this list, it was eclectic because of my experiences in other places. So I really, really started to embrace the Italian culture, and like I said, it was like a home away from home after a while.
Yeah. Now the next one, Stormzy, was a late entry because you sent me your top 5, and then almost immediately, no, can I change my mind? So Stormzy's made a late entry.
Yeah.
So it must be good if it's in the list.
Well, yeah, for me, the Stormzy song, it's more to do with me now and kind of what I'm trying to achieve. So, like, I do a lot of work now with young athletes and kind of embracing, you know, who I am. I always talk about embracing your uniqueness. And for a lot of people, there's a lot of apathy that exists, that they can't achieve certain things and certain goals. Like, the reality is, not everyone can be a professional athlete, but if you're only going to measure success from being a professional athlete, then my success ends after 7 to 10 years. You can't be a professional athlete your whole life. So my thing is, it's all about bracing you. And the superhero song, Storms, is essentially saying, you know, being young and black's not a bad thing. It's something that's really powerful. You're a superhero. You can embrace that. You know, being a strong black woman in society it's a good thing. So, you know, I'm bringing race into this, but for me, it's more than that. It's just learning for anybody. You know, they can embrace their uniqueness and be something. And I think that's a message that a lot of people miss, because our perception of success and what it should be and what it looks like. You know, I even hate from being a basketball player, and that sense of, you know, everyone, when I go into schools, that's success because I've been at the Olympics. I don't need to be an Olympian to be successful. You know, it could be being the best at this to being the best at that, or actually just giving your best, you know, being your personal best. So I think that song, it kind of resonates for me and kind of helps me realize that, you know, I talk about being that role model and inspiring a generation. Well, that's a powerful song to kind of do that.
Yeah. And the next one, Proclaimers, which, you know, everybody in the Ratney knows this song, but actually, we've actually not had it that often, if at all, on the players, which somewhat surprises me. So it's kind of good in a way, even though we know it off by heart. It's on the list. But for Kieron, why does the Proclaimers make it onto the list?
So that comes down to, you know, I'm sorry to any of the English people listening to this, but that was the Commonwealth Games after the England game.
Right, okay.
It was one of those things. I remember being on the court at that time, and I was saying to my teammates at the time, because we knew we'd won the game, I was like, we don't celebrate. We walk off this court like we do this all the time. Right. And the final whistle blew, and I jumped up and screamed like I was at the opening ceremony. It was I just couldn't control myself. But that song started playing.
Yeah.
So that became our song for the team. You know, we can embrace that. We sang it on the bus. We did this. We did that. So it was just a nice moment to share, and one of the best memories in my basketball career. And like I said, it was it was so cliche, the song, but at the same time, it was one of those things that you were really proud to be Scottish and represent your country on a big stage.
Yeah, I mean, every Scotsman and Scotswoman likes beating England in whatever sports. You go in a moment, you say, Kieron, go in a moment. That's a great top 5. If only we could play them out, which we might do. We'll kind of edit this down perhaps and put out a podcast version with the tunes in all their glory. So that's Kieron's top 5 list. The tunes that get him motivated are the ones that he associates with a sporting moment in his life. So if you've just joined us on YouTube or on Facebook, this is Graeme Easton's playlist, where we chat to the greats and goods of mainly the Scottish sporting world about the tunes on their playlist and also their career and what they're up to in the future. And you guys are very much part of the conversation as well. Don't be shy. Just post a question in the comments and we'll put them up on screen and give Kieron the chance to answer the question. So we've got a question coming here from, who's this? This is Yana. I don't know if you know Yana. I don't know Yana. Who is your mentor or mentors plural? There's a nice question.
Yeah, it's a real good question. I have a few, to be fair. Like I said, I think that I'm a very curious person. So I'm always looking at different walks of life and different industries and different this and different that. And what I've learned quick is you want to surround yourself with what you perceive as the people who have had success in some capacity. So I've tended to do that at the moment. One of my mentors would be my CEO actually at Frog Systems, Phil Worms. I just love the way he operates. He's much of a people person, very empathetic. I like to say he's got high levels of emotional intelligence. So that's someone I've really embraced. There was Lisa Wainwright, who was a British basketball. She really helped me on my journey. There was Guy Richardson, who rugby, I think he's a board member at Basketball Scotland. Helped me so much when I was preparing for my transition and kind of things to look at. From a basketball perspective, mentors, I've had Tony Hansen was my first real mentor. Keith Bunyan was a real mentor of mine, really kind of helped me and showed me what it was like to be a pro. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I have one or two mentors. I have so many. I think you can learn from so many people. I even talk about my kids now. I learn more from my kids than I'm probably teaching them. So I think I've just learned to embrace others and kind of take a little bit the good things and the things I'd maybe want to change and kind of make it more me. But yeah, I think I'm just, like I said, a very curious person, and I learn a lot from a lot of different people. I'm sure there's a few I'm missing out at this moment in time. Yeah, there's quite a few.
Yeah, this next question I'll bring in slightly controversial, but was linked to it, so that's the reason why I'm bringing it in. And it's from somebody called Emma Easton. And young Amber, who's one of my youngsters, she wants to know, Kieron, how old you were when you started playing and who introduced you to the sport?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when I first started playing like club basketball, I was maybe 15. So yeah, I was introduced to the sport. It was actually I played at PE in school, and one of our sixth year pupils, his name was Neil Connell. A lot of people know him in the basketball community. He was coaching the school team, and I don't know why he asked me, the 6'4" kid, to go along to basketball training. But yeah, I went along. There was guys like Ali Hogg and stuff who I'd known just through, they were rugby players, but they'd also played basketball. So I just went along and had some fun, and we ended up winning the Scottish Cup with the school team. So from that, I think having that early success, I think it just kind of made me embrace that. And fortunately, Neil's dad, George Connell, was a coach. So he was linked with Falkirk Fury at the time. And I didn't go straight to Falkirk Fury. I wasn't ready, so I started going to kind of like an after-school club at Stirling High. And once my confidence kind of got up, George then took me along to Falkirk Fury, which I absolutely loved as well.
Yeah. Good stuff. Keep those questions coming in. Don't be shy. Get on Facebook comments, or if you're watching on YouTube, just post your comments for Kieron, and we'll try and squeeze them in before we finish. Also got a wee secret for Kieron, which if you've seen the show before, you'll know what's maybe coming up next. But for Kieron, it's kind of top secret. I'm making him looking worried there on the sofa there. Now you've told us all that you've officially retired from basketball, which I'm sure, like every sports person, is that thing. Oh, is that day going to come? Is it the right thing to do? I'm sure you debated it long and hard. Was it kind of straightforward for you? Was it you'd all sit and mapped out? Were you mulling it over for about 3 or 4 months or years before
my whole life was planned out. In fact, I'd planned to retire in 2020, wearing number 20. Thought it would make sense.
Right.
So glad I didn't. Looking back at the pandemic and everything, my career was just ended. But my last year playing for the Rocks, I really struggled. When I say mentally, I just wasn't in it at all. I just it was actually becoming a chore, going to training sessions and so forth. And it's not like I just, like I said, I wasn't enjoying it. There was so many other things in my life I was thinking about. Started to lose confidence in the way I was playing. Didn't like where our team was heading. I didn't like the infrastructure of, like, from a coaching perspective so there was so many different factors that came into that. So I made the decision, and it was a hard decision to make because it was, like I said, it's my life. It's all I knew. But I made the decision just before Christmas, and I remember this was 2018 Christmas time. And I remember making that decision, and then there was like an announcement that I was going to be retiring at the end of the season, and I just felt this whole weight lifted off my shoulders. It was just like, wow, you know. And it was funny because after that, I think I actually started playing better,
Right.
which then made you think, you know what, should I actually retire in the first place? But I just felt free, and I think that really kind of helped me. It kind of gave me a little bit of focus on, like I said, I was thinking about what was next. I was back at university at the time doing my masters and stuff. I was still at Basketball Scotland, but yeah, I just felt free, and I knew then it was the right decision.
And just even talking to you today, and then before we sort of came on air, and things I've read and things you've been getting involved in, you seem in a very good place. And I think you alluded to say on, you know what you want to sort of give back. You know what's in your DNA, and know that's related. And what you're basically doing professionally now, you've done a wee bit of athlete mentoring, but also a big thing that you're very passionate about is that the whole person, the kind of mental health of a person. You said earlier on about success doesn't have to be gold medals and scoring the winning basket necessarily, but it strikes me you're in a kind of happy place, both with your job and just your life just now. If you maybe tell us a little about what you're doing, not on the basketball court now.
So I was very fortunate. Like I mentioned, one of my mentors, Phil Worms. He's the CEO of Frog Systems and mental health platform. It kind of talks about the lived experience. We have a thing called the Champions Cinema, which was originally the whole champions kind of talking about addiction and overcoming that, and how do they, what was a light bulb moment, and then the message of hope for others. But I applied that to sport, and it actually started to happen through my dissertation. So my dissertation was on the athlete transition out of professional sport into the working environment. So now I'm getting an opportunity to interview a lot of athletes who'd been through that transition. And that was like therapy to me, like listening to these stories and listening to people saying, I did this, I did that. And I was like, okay, I've done this, I've done that. And it's going to be okay. And I think that for me, you can apply that to any walk in life. And I think that when people talk about their lived experience and people who have been through things, it makes you understand that you're not alone and that there is support out there. And so I think that Frog, for me, there's purpose to what I'm doing. And I think that being so fortunate to play sport, I always loved what I did, and there was always a purpose to it. I knew that I needed to have some type of purpose that kind of aligned with my values.
So, what is that actually you're doing day to day? You're working with people. You mentioned, are you going into kind of schools and things like that? So, what is it? Is there a typical Kieron day just now? I think we just lost Kieron there for a second. I thought he'd paused at mid sentence there. That's why I jumped in there. Maybe when his kids have pulled out the Wi-Fi, or maybe his wife's sneaked on Netflix, who knows. But if you have just joined us, we're listening and watching to Kieron Achara on Graham Easton's playlist. He's been chatting about his top 5 motivational tunes, and it did include the Proclaimers. We haven't had the Proclaimers on that often on playlists, but Kieron chose that because it was the song that got played automatically when Scotland beat England at the Commonwealth Games in 2018. He was jumping up and down like a wee kid, he told us, for that. And he also told us about the power of motivation, what he's doing now professionally, now that he's off the basketball court. So it's been really listening to hear about that side to him. And what we're going to do very, very soon is bring in the big bubble hat questions. Now, if you've never watched the show before, we've got a big bubble hat. So I'll kind of bring it in now. That is the one of the many big bubble hats. That's the Smarty Party version, full colour effect there. We've got some questions we're going to ask Kieron. They're kind of quick fire questions to do with music and sport, and hopefully we'll get Kieron back on a minute or two to join us. And so right on cue, he's come back in.
Did you kick me off there because I was talking too much?
No. I think one of the kids woke up there and was saying, "Dad, I need a feed," or "Dad, I need a story."
My daughter probably snuck on Netflix.
Yeah. So you are unfortunately in full flow telling us about the great work you're doing with Frog. I was just going to ask you, when you kind of dipped out there, what are you actually sort of doing day to day? Have you got a sort of typical day, or is it kind of very much you don't know what each day is going to bring for you?
Yeah, so right now a typical day is essentially trying to. There's two arms to it. There's me chasing down sporting organisations and saying, look, players' welfare is really, really important. Here's a tool that can actually help players with, in a safe space and kind of understand that. And then the second part is actual chasing people for video content to actually tell their stories. And I've been very fortunate. I had Kyla Nelson on recently talking about her, her battle with cancer and how she overcame that, and the kind of the people and the supports that were in her life. And like I said, there's just some real inspirational kind of stories about. And what I've started to realize that everyone's got a story. Everyone's had something, and I think that brings us even more together. Like, it helps kind of like eradicate that kind of stigma, to understand that it's okay to have moments of what people perceive as weakness. I think it's a real strength actually to be able to kind of tell your story and try and ask for help. And that's something that a lot of people find hard, especially in a sporting culture. We were kind of brainwashed to believe that we were to kind of hide everything, and we were these kind of demigods that can battle over anything because we've got this resilience, we've got this, we've got that. But the reality is we're just humans kind of going on, and I think that's really kind of important for people to understand that. When I look at the online trolling and everything that comes along with that in sport, I think sometimes people just forget that they're just human beings trying to make a living.
One thing that we were talking kind of off air, and somebody's kind of come in with a kind of similar question, and that's your work in terms of promoting the sport, but kind of the whole person. So bring a question from Yana, who's got another good question. So thank you, Yana, for watching us on Playlist. Do you see a future supporting youth in after-school program sports? Now, you're very kind of passionate about this and sport getting its chance, and basketball's your big thing, and giving people, or as many people as possible, an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, deep down, my goal was always to create. I always wanted to have an own academy. That was something that I was really kind of passionate about. But the reality is, it's like I love basketball, but it's not just basketball. I think that people being involved in sport. I've been very fortunate. Like, already, I do support a lot. I don't have my own, but I'm very involved in schools. Very strong links to the Glenboig Primary Schools are an example of that. I've done a lot of work there with them, and even now with Concilium Sports, there's a foundation arm there. We've had a lot of conversations about how we can actually help grassroots, and I believe that sport and education have to be really linked and fused together a lot more. Like, I think that's from my experiences in America. I think that education and sport kind of went hand in hand. Well, I feel here that we, even though clubs are linked with schools, I think that as it climbs, I think a lot of people neglect the education aspect of things. And the message I'm trying to show is that you can actually do both. And I actually believe by doing both and having more of a dual career, it's actually showing, research is showing that actually enhances your performance. So, yeah, the answer, again, I always babble on, but definitely I'm more than happy to be involved in any capacity. It's, for me right now, the challenge I've been finding is, after professional sport, is how do I make a living as well as do all the other things that I want to do, or do I find a way to make that become my living? And that's, I think that's where I've really struggled, because I've given a lot of time that I forget that I've actually got bills and everything to pay as well.
Maybe you just sit on the sofa and just talk. I'm fascinated by how you're chatting and so passionate about these things that really kind of are part of your DNA. That's what I'm kind of picking up here. So we could talk.
Oh, I'm losing you again.
All night with this, and we probably should do. But I'm bringing in the prop here. I'm bringing in the prop here. This is a big ball hat, Kieron. Now, in the hat are some questions, Kieron. So what I call quick fire questions. So not exactly a one-word answer, but we do love you talking. But if you keep them kind of short and sharp, they're either to do with sports generically or music. So these are the big ball hats, and anything can come in the hat. So I'm going to put, there are actually bits of paper here. Okay. So, okay, this could be good. You've kind of talked about this already, but we'll give it a second chance. Kieron, do you have a favourite basketball shirt that you've worn? Now, you've got 3 behind you there. So is it possible to narrow down your favourite basketball?
It's actually none of those. I had one, again, Falkirk Fury days. we had these Adidas strips. I think George Connell picked up in the States, and they were. Oh, I just loved them. That's nothing. I had a Adidas deal for a few years as well, so there was nothing there but plug in Adidas. But yeah, I loved that strip. I think we wore it for like 4 different seasons, but it was a nice one.
Wait, we played for Falkirk there, Falkirk Fury. Right. Now, you haven't actually mentioned this already, so this will be interesting, I don't think. Kieron, is it possible for you to tell us or narrow down your favourite band or your favourite artist, musically speaking? Is it possible for you to do that?
I'll tell you my favourite song of all time. It's
Go for it.
Bobby McFerrin, Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Oh, yes, yeah.
But right now, like I said, from a music perspective, I'm listening to a lot of Burna Boy. Yeah, so I wouldn't say that. Yeah, I would say I like certain types of music more, so I wouldn't actually narrow it down to a favourite band or group.
Okay, let's bring the hat back out. If you've just joined us, this is Kieron Achara on Playlist Live. We're doing the big bubble hat questions. Some of the questions are to do with sports, some are to do with music. Just a quick fire. Right now, you've got a big book of contacts, Kieron. So I'm expecting a quality answer to this one, Kieron. Which Scottish sports personality would you like to see and hear on Playlist? Whose musical choices would fascinate you from the Scottish sporting world?
That's a tough one.
It is, but I thought I'd ask it.
I'm just trying to think from the Commonwealth Games who I thought was a real.
See, some folk have said obvious things like Andy Murray. I don't know what he'd be into, but you're going a bit more left field than Andy Murray.
Yeah, it's actually stumped me right now.
Oh, right, no worries. We've had the first stump. That's fine. Right.
I would have said Kirsty, but you've already had her on, so.
Yeah, no. Right. Now, I might broaden this one out slightly. Kieron, do you remember the first sporting match you went to? Now, that may or may not have been basketball. It could have been football. It could have been shinty. It could be anything. But do you remember the first sort of big sporting event you went to just as a kid?
I do. I went to watch UK versus USA at Kelvin Hall athletics.
All right.
And I remember my brother ran on to the track after Sally Gunnell ran, and she was like hands on her knees, and I tried to run on too. I got stopped by the security guard, and he actually got an autograph right after I finished the race. And we went on the team bus afterwards.
Right.
And I met Colin Jackson and Linford Christie.
Wow.
And I remember Colin Jackson turned around to me and said, "All right, Jimmy." And that was it. I was just like, no, this is not for me anymore. But that was my first major sporting event.
There you go then. We usually get kind of football's the obvious one for that one. There you go then. Right. Oh, no, here we go. Right. We're really going to get into kind of basketball now. Right. Is there, Kieron, within basketball, a rule or just something that people do or a team does or a player does that just annoys you? So the analogy I always give, which annoys me just now, is that when a footballer scores a goal, every footballer just seems to slide on their knees. Is there a kind of petty thing like that, or a rule that just gets your goat in basketball? There's nobody watching, so you can say what you want.
You know what? I just think everything's amazing about basketball. There's not one thing that really. You know what? I think the only thing that really annoys me in basketball is the referees. To be fair,
very sort of diplomatic. Right. Okay. For a couple more, is that okay?
Sure.
Right. Sure, right, okay. Now, we'll maybe broaden this one slightly. I don't know, or you can maybe keep it to basketball. You can choose. Do you have a favourite Scottish player? Now, I have player because it can be broad. You can either choose your favourite Scottish basketball player, or if you want to widen it to another sport, your favourite Scotland player or athlete.
I'll stick with basketball, and it has to be the legend that was Robert Archibald.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Sadly passed away this year, but yeah, he was talking about mentors and role models. He was the guy, helped me at every stage of my career. So yeah, I would say that that would definitely be my favourite.
Okay, good answer. Okay, back to music. Kieron, is there a singer or a band you just don't get, or maybe a genre of music, the one you'd put into the equivalent of Room 101, just a band or a singer or a genre you're going, I just cannot get into that?
Heavy metal. And
Right.
when I was over in the States, a lot of my teammates loved it, and I've just never been able to get into it. It's just one of those things that just
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just not for me. Not
I'm
for
kind of
me.
with you on that one. Right. We'll go for two more. Is that okay?
Let's go.
Let's go. Right. Okay. We're sticking with music here. Do you have a favourite music gig you've been to? I don't know if you've been to many gigs. I've not taught gigs tonight, but is there a favourite music gig?
You know what? I've not been to a lot of gigs. I've been to 2 concerts in my life. One was actually the year of the Olympics. We went to Coldplay in Houston.
Right. Okay.
And we got VIP passes, which was cool because one of our physio knew someone on the band.
Right.
So we got backstage. We met Chris Martin's dad and stuff. It was actually really, really cool. You know, and that was my first ever concert. And the thing for me, being so tall, I've never wanted to go to things like that because I just didn't want to be blocking people's views. And so that was something that was always anxiety always kind of played out with that. But that was amazing. And then I went to Ed Sheeran in Glasgow.
Okay.
And I just loved that. I just thought it was really, really kind of cool. But yeah, that's it. Other than that, I've been to, you know, there was one at Candor Park and Mary and who's that? Who was Mbop? What was the
Hanson?
They were playing in it. I remember they said "Hello England" and everyone started booing them. It was quite an experience.
Cool. Right. I have no control over the questions. The last quick fire question. Oh, this is a good one to end with. Kieron, is there a match, a sporting event that you'd love to go to? You've not been yet. Is there a sporting event or a match in any sport, perhaps, that you'd love to go to?
Yeah, I've always wanted. I used to love going to Pittsburgh Steelers when I was in Pittsburgh, but I would love to go to a Super Bowl. I think that'd be pretty cool. And then I always said I always wanted to go and watch Wimbledon. That's another thing that I'd kind of like to kind of experience. But yeah, I've got a lot more time now to do sporting events. So let's see. EuroLeague final would be cool as well.
Yes, indeed. Right, those are the quick fire questions over. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time chatting to Kieron on Playlist Live on Facebook and YouTube. Thank you for your questions, but don't go quite yet. Got a few extra things to tell you about and tease you with. But we must thank Kieron for being on the playlist first and foremost. But for those that are watching for the first time, we've got a couple more in the bank you can watch. Like just go down the feed if you're watching, and you can watch some of the shows we've had on previously. So we've had Shelley Kerr, the Scotland Women's manager, who was a great chat, great form, like Kieron, very much into our music, and a slightly kind of left field, but great fun nonetheless. Last week, spoke with Peter Dixon, who I worked with at London 2012 when I worked at the beach volleyball doing the announcing there. Peter was in great form. Also had Scott Hastings, Tam Cowan, Scott Wilson, who's the Hearts Stadium announcer, Kirsty Gilmore from badminton, who Kieron knows very, very well. She's got some great chat, and Grant Stott, who used to present Scott Sport, if you're old enough to remember that back in the day. And next week, we've pulled out the big guns. We've got Archie McPherson of a certain vintage watching football on TV. Archie McPherson, famous commentator and an author of a couple of books, who I'm sure he'll be delighted to talk about. So join myself and Archie next Tuesday. I have no idea what his musical choices will be, but hey, that's the beauty of this show, and hopefully tuning in to Archie next Tuesday at 9 p.m. on the same channel on Facebook and or on YouTube. And if you want to listen to the music of some of the guests, I've had 60 odd guests on the podcast version, which you can listen to and all your listening pleasure at the Mixcloud platform. Just go to the official website, whoosh.tv/Graham Easton's playlist. There's some fine sporting icons there. Doddy Weir, great form. Obviously, sadly, just now at MND. We wish him all the best. Stephen Gallagher for World of Golf, big fan of Simple Minds, always listens to music on the course when he's going round, because he only actually hits the ball for about 18 minutes, he said. An amazing stat. I've got Tim Visser from rugby. Adam Hastings, hilarious. His quiz topic is Justin Bieber. You should listen to that bit and that bit alone. What a laugh that was. And Ailey Barber, who's doing rather well for herself in the world of sports broadcasting. So lots of good reasons to listen to the music of the great and good of the Scottish sporting world. But for the time being, I want to say a big thank you to Kieron Achara, basketball legend, and doing his best to promote all that's good in sport and mental health. So thanks to Kieron for watching. Thank you for all your questions. And as I like to say at the end, stay safe, keep washing your hands, and we'll see you in the next edition of Graham Easton's Playlist.
Thank you.